This is the story of this boy who dies a useless death and is reborn in another world. One day, while going home, Sheena saw people running away from the shop and two girls slip right next to him. A thief moves towards the two girls with his knife. Sheena runs towards him and knocks him down. He asks the girls to run away, but before he could understand anything, red sauce starts coming out of his stomach. Seeing this, the thief runs away in fear. In his last moments, he was happy to save those two girls, but he wishes that he had not made them cry. His eyes close, and when he opens his eyes, he finds himself in a mysterious room. A maid cries and calls him by the name of Cain, which confuses him. Milk Mommy hugs Cain and asks him if he remembers his boobs. I mean if he remembers his mother. Cain gets more confused, but when he takes a look at the mirror, he realizes that he is fucked. He starts to panic and wonders what he has become. Being in a coma for a week, the maid thinks that his fever is messing with his memory. His mother asks Sylvia to go and prepare soup for him, and after they leave the room, Cain still has no idea how he has become a child. He wonders if he is the main character of an anime. Without wasting time, he starts to search his whole room to find a weapon, but he sees his small gun and thinks that it will take time to become a rifle.
Yeah, boy.
Sylvia thinks that he has wet himself, but poor Cain is embarrassed to be naked in front of Sylvia. After she leaves the room, Cain manages to extract all the information he wanted. His real name is Cain Van Silfer, the 3-year-old son of Graham and Sarah. He has a sister named Runny. Graham is a top G and his second wife is Maria, and she has given birth to his two older siblings. His father is a high-ranking ruler and maintain an army to protect their kingdom's borders from the jungle of Monster. Cain is excited to hear that Munster exists, but Sylvia tells him that some adventurers can use magic as well, and Cain gets even more excited. Sylvia promises to teach him magic, but before that he has to learn to read, so he starts practicing right away. When Cain learns about magic, he decides that he wants to live his whole life here, because in his old world his parents had already died and his last relative, his grandfather, had also died. During dinner, Graham learns that her son can write and Rainey reveals that she also knows math. Sarah thinks that her son is a genius, but Cain calls Sylvia the best maid in the world for teaching him, and Sylvia feeds him milk extracted from his mother. Graham wishes he should be there when the milk was extracted. Cain reveals that he wants to learn everything about the world, so that he can become an adventurer, and Graham is happy to hear this. Graham allows him to read all her magic books, but tells him that he will be baptized at the age of 5, and before that he will not be able to use magic, but the naughty one is already shooting fire from his hand. He realizes that he can already use magic, but his hands burn while using magic, and he is also not able to control the magic. Cain thinks that this magical power will help him to become the most powerful edgelord in the world. Rainey secretly comes in the room and tells him that she has found out all his secrets, and she knows that he is secretly studying the world, and Cain gets happy that his sister is a fool. Since then his sister tells him everything about the heavy world and about Yuya, the first adventurer to create this empire. After knowing about all the wonders of the world, he cannot wait 2 more years for his baptism, but that day finally comes, and his family is happy with how handsome he looks, and how beautiful he is. They ride through town on a horse, and Cain is amazed to see the world looking like an old world for the first time. He is eager to receive God's blessing, so he asks his sister to show him her status window, and looks at all her stats, but he also sees that she loves her brother. She immediately tells him to forget everything he has seen, and Cain pretends that he does not know what she is talking about. His father tells him that there are many levels of God's blessing. The level of each blessing is between 1 to 5, and they are given by the God according to the interest and ability of the person. They reach the church to get Cain blessed, and the priest starts the baptism. A dazzling light starts shining from the statues of the gods, and Cain teleports in front of all the 7 gods, and they welcome him by his real name, Sheena. The god of creation, Jerome, introduces himself, but Cain thinks that this fake Santa is going to kill him. Santa tells him that he can hear whatever he is thinking, and then they all talk about his reincarnation. They tell him that Cain's death was useless because if he had not stopped the criminal would have fallen and everyone would have stopped him. Meaning Cain is a simp who got himself killed because of 2 girls. He was trying to become a hero in front of Gillers, because he died for a good cause, so they reincarnated him. Even though he looks stupid, but Cain is not sad at all. After all, he is born in a loving family, and now he can use magic, which is one of his dreams. Reno, god of magic, blesses him with magic. Germ gives him his blessing, along with the god of war, so that he becomes the strongest warrior. God of technology gives him a big brain so that he can stop messing with women and stop clapping them.
Yeah, boy.
God of Commerce gives him the ability to make decisions in item box, so that he can become rich as Elon Musk. With a great body, God of Earth comes and blesses him, that he can have the biggest dick.
Oh my god!
Germ tells him that in his status window he will see the effect of their blessings, and starts laughing before sending him back. Priest has never seen the statues shine so much before, so Germ tells Kane to show the status window. Immediately though, Kane senses something is wrong, so he runs to the bathroom to check the status window, and when he sees, he is shocked, because all the gods have blessed him with level 10, which is twice the highest level. Kane knows he has to hide all this, and he sees a secret technique called status conceal, which he uses to hide his status. At dinner table, Kane is with his family who wish him a happy birthday. Graham asks him if they can see his status window, and he shows it to everyone. His whole family is shocked because he has been blessed by all 7 gods, and his magical level is more than 340,000. He is only 5 years old and he is more powerful than most magicians in the whole country. This scares his father and he makes him promise to keep his stats secret. Kane gets up and goes to sleep. Then he sees a summoning magical book and tries to summon a cute animal in the backyard of his mansion. He activates the summoning circle, but a huge demon comes out of it. His sister and Parma scream in fear and he remembers his old life. But this time he promises that everything will be different. So he proceeds to fight the monster, but the monster punches him. With pain, Kane promises that he will no longer make the people cry. He cares. He wants to protect others, so he uses all the energy in his body to cast a spell which makes the monster disappear. As he lays down on the floor, he sees the cat ears and wishes he could touch them. He wishes he didn't have to make people cry again and worries that he is going to die. However, a few minutes later, Kane wakes up and finds out that he is still alive, and sees that the people he tried to save are not crying. He realizes that in this world his powers can actually help save people. On the day of his birthday celebration, his father asks him what he wants to become in the future. Kane says that he wants to be a husband of 2 wives like him, so that he can have threesome. He tells that he wants to travel around the country, so that he can get to know all the girls of the country, and wants to help all kinds of people, especially girls, who have big hearts, and will become an adventurer to protect everyone's smile. After hearing the resolve in his voice, Graham promises to hire a tutor for him. Inside his room, he is thinking about what kind of tutor he will be, but his tutor has arrived. Kane is so excited that he runs towards the window and accidentally teleports outside and falls at his favorite place. He apologizes to the girl, and the butler introduces both of Kane's tutors, Melly and Nina. Inside the mansion, Melly has a problem introducing herself, but Kane is busy noticing that Nina is an elf. Graham says that they don't need to be so shy, and Kane tells them to talk to her as if she is their friend. Millie is excited to teach her, and she immediately starts the lesson inside the training area. Kane demonstrates his swordsmanship. Nina asks him if he has been blessed by the god of war, and Kane says yes, but it's a secret. Millie laughs and begs Nina to teach her some magic before her sword penetrates him. Nina reveals that she has level 3 magical ability, but Kane has already learned the basics. He can do all kinds of magic, and his spells are so powerful that they can break through stone targets. Kane reveals that he's received protection from the magic god as well, and Millie worries that they can't teach him anything. After all, he pulls out a towel from his item box, and the girls realize that they're basically useless. If they were to try to teach him anything here, he would end up destroying the entire manor. So, Kane suggests they go outside the mansion to study. He's never left the premises, so Millie and Na think it would be better for him to go outside. Anyway, they explain to Garm that Kane's abilities will destroy the mansion. Garm panics when he finds out his son is this strong on the first day. He knew this day would come eventually, but hoped Kane would mature more first. Reluctantly, Garm agrees to let him go outside on the condition that he never enters the forest. Kane promises that he will, and he leaves the mansion for the first time with his tutors. Nina begins with his magic training and asks him to demonstrate his intermediate level magic immediately. Kane readies a fire spell and casts it towards the stone, knocking both of the girls back and leaving a giant crater where the stone once was. They wonder if consuming all that mana has tired him out, but Kane hasn't broken a single sweat as he laughs off his accomplishment. Millie realizes there are enemies nearby, and a rabbit jumps out from the bushes to attack Millie, but her attack misses. The rabbit rushes towards Kane, but he dodges it and shoots air bullets to defeat it. Millie wonders if he's going to sell the drops, but Kane wants to show them to his family, so he stores them in his item box. Millie is amazed since she's been saving up for years to get a magic bag, a less powerful version of his item box. In the meantime, Na uses her search ability to scan within 300 meters for monsters. Cain thinks what she did was cool, so he tries to copy the same spell, casting it to locate the exact location of the 4 rabbits, surprising Na that someone could even count the specific number of monsters. He runs towards them, and Millie tells her that she should just give up already. They defeat all of the rabbits together. However, one of them runs away, and Cain tries to pursue it, but Millie warns him to never go inside the forest, as it has legendary monsters living inside. Every few decades, all the monsters try to break into the city, which is why their wall is so fortified. Cain realizes how dangerous it is but wishes to one day explore it on his own. That night, he realizes that he's already reached level 8 after beating just a few rabbits. He investigates the reason for his massive level up and sees that the God Chosen title granted him 100 times more XP. But not only that, each level up granted him 100 times the ability points. Cain's power has already surpassed most humans, and he's realized that the entire nation is going to try and get rid of him if this continues. A few months later, Millie takes Cain to the Adventurers Guild so he can fight some stronger monsters. Rudy asks what brings them here today, and Millie wants to acquire some quests that would be perfect for Cain. However, a man comes and mocks Millie and Na for being drinkers and babysitting a child, since she's a D rank. He tells her to ditch the kid so he can show her what a real D rank looks like. Na tells him to back off, but Cross is fed up with her disrespect and picks her up while 2 others restrain Millie. As he's about to grab her face, Cain holds his arm and says that he will not allow him to treat his tutors like that. Millie begs Cain to run, but Cain tells him that he needs to start training and smacks him in the face. Cross recovers and tries punching him, but Cain evades and destroys his footwork, saying that his name is Cain. Cross continues trying to fight him. He grabs a knife and tries to strike Cain with incredible speed, but Cain evades every single one of the attacks, going as far as to even hold his sword with his fingers and throwing him out. The other 2 hold knives to Millie, but Cain makes quick work of them and kicks them out. Nina comes to hug Cain, promising that she'll protect him next time. After years of training and enjoying their time together, Cain has grown into a charming, tall man. Sylvia lets him know that his final class with his tutors will be in a few days, and Cain is excited because he wishes to find a way to thank them. He remembers that Millie wanted a magic bag, so that night, Cain snuck into the deepest parts of the dark forest. A blood ogre appeared before him. Next, he defeated an earth dragon, and the guards thought that a monster rampage was about to commence. This decade, the entire army was deployed, and Garm led the troops to defeat them. Cain has collected everything he's come to get and teleports away, leaving behind his towel. Garm arrives at the scene, and his subordinate informs him that all the monsters have been eliminated in the forest. Wondering who could be so overpowered, Garm looks at the ground to find his towel, shocking every bone in his body. The final day of Cain's tutoring arrives, leaving Millie and Na with a bittersweet feeling for having been with him all this time. They come and let him know that today will be his graduation and congratulate him on working hard for the last 3 years. Cain thanks them for all the time they've spent with him, and he hopes that the magical bags he's created for them will show how grateful he is. He's collected the materials from the Blood Ogre and Earth Dragon inside the forest, but he tells them not to worry, because they're just regular bags that won't hold too much, just an entire mansion. Millie tells him that the most expensive magic bag can only carry 2 carriages worth of items, so this magic bag would be national treasure class. Millie's worried people would try to rob them of it, but Cain reveals that he's enchanted them so that if anyone else carries these bags, they'll be as heavy as everything held inside of them. Sensational. Millie and Nina thank him for doing all this, and they both get on their knees for him. That's not fair. That's not fair, they tell him. They say that if he ever needs their help when he grows up, he can always come to them, and they can help him with anything he needs. At that moment, their contract was over, and Cain felt like he'd grown a little more, and so did they. Months later, inside a deep cave, Cain battled against a red dragon and struck it once, defeating it instantly. He had defeated one of the strongest mobs in existence. When he examined his level, he realized his magic was over 80 million, and he'd earned the title, Dragon Slayer. 2 years have passed since that day, and Cain is finally 10 years old. He will be attending a noble event to commemorate his birthday. It will take a week to reach their destination, as long as monsters don't interrupt their travels. Cain casts his search ability to scan a 3-kilometer radius. He discovers that monsters have ambushed soldiers ahead and tells his dad to hurry so they can try to save the people. However, the horses are too slow, so Cain jumps out of the carriage like Spider-Man and activates his wind magic, dashing towards the source of the monsters. The soldiers are cornered and are about to be defeated, but Cain jumps in and saves one of the soldiers. He continues flying around, using his air cutter ability to decimate every single one of the monsters in his way. Still, a few beasts charge towards the carriage, so Cain summons his sword and destroys them with a single swing until he faces the boss. Immediately, he dodges the beast and jumps into the sky, enchanting his sword with fire before ending the monster in his way. The soldier warns him to stay away from the carriage, so Cain tries to introduce himself as the son of Garm. Just then, Garm's soldiers arrive and realize they're completely useless. The soldier collapses from losing all his blood, so Cain holds him tight and activates his healing ability, helping every single soldier recover instantly. Garm finally arrives and sees the terrible scene that unfolded before him, but instantly recognizes the crest on the carriage as the royal family. Inside, two girls appear, Talisa, the princess, and Silk, the duke's daughter. They thank Garm for saving them both, but Garm lets them know that it was his son, Cain, who saved them. Talisa nearly faints, so Cain goes on to use a relaxing spell to make her feel better. The light soothes all of their pain and anxiety away, but the little sucker enchanted it with some other type of magic. Immediately, Talisa runs over and thanks him for saving them. Silk holds his hand and thinks he's the greatest swordsman she's ever seen, but Talisa says that he's going to be hers, and they begin fighting over him. They drag him to their carriage and take him away in front of his father's eyes. Inside their huge carriage, Cain wonders why they're sitting so close to him, but Talisa is too scared for him to leave her. She tells him to call her Telis, and Silk asks him to call her Silk. His spell was too strong, and they continue trying to charm him until he succumbs. The soldier informs them that they're finally approaching the rest area, and Cain thinks that this is a mess, but the girls want to rest with him. After they arrive at the rest area, Cain tries to escape the situation, but Talisa and Silk tell him that they want to spend the night with him or they'll be scared. Garm tries to say that it's inappropriate, but the girls claim they're too traumatized and are afraid a dragon might come to attack them. Garm says that he can take care of it, but Silk tells him that he's worthless compared to Cain. You're a victim. They beg Cain to stay the night with them, and he accepts, if they would separate the beds as far as possible. Garm says he may have 2 wives, but he should be careful because he'll have to deal with twice the headaches. That's not ridiculous. That's not ridiculous to say that, Garm adds. Inside the bedroom, the girls beg him to sleep next to them, and they push the beds close to each other. But pushing the beds next to each other wasn't enough, so they decide to use Cain like a body pillow all night. The poor Gigachad has created his own harem at the age of 10, but he's already learned that he would rather be single for the rest of his life. He didn't get any sleep that entire night, but after a few more sleepless nights, he finally arrived at the capital. The head knight greets them, and they continue clinging to Cain. The knight bows to honor Cain's presence, having already heard the news of how Cain heroically saved everyone. As for the ones who were fallen, Cain's item box allowed him to return their bodies to their families. The bell rings, and Cain tries to dip, but the knight informs him that he's going to be meeting with the king inside the heart of the castle. Every major politician has gathered for Cain's audience with the king. He takes a bow, and the king's council commends him for being able to save Talisa and Silk from all 50 orcs single-handedly. To reward him for his bravery, the king bestows upon him a mansion, 10 platinum coins, and the honorary title of baron. Some of the politicians think this is controversial, and some fatso walks in and says it's not fair to give a child such wealth. The king tells Cornago to learn how to stop opening his mouth, or he'll stay fat his whole life. The king says he would never have been able to save the girls in Cornago's position. This kingdom needs more knights like Cain, so the king's decision will not change, sending Cornago running away. The king asks if Cain will accept, and with no room for objection, Cain humbly accepts all the awards. But the king isn't done with him and wants to talk with him in private. Dar and Cain wait to meet with him, and his father congratulates him on getting his own mansion before his other boys. The king enters along with the 2 girls, and Cain realizes that he can't tell the king about his daughter calling him Daddy last night. The knight thanks Cain for saving his daughter, and the duke also expresses his gratitude for saving his daughter, Sil. The king tells him that there's something important he's come to discuss and asks if he would take his daughter's and the duke's daughter's hands. He wouldn't be married yet, but they would wait until he's an adult. After all, he linked arms with them and slept with 2 unmarried ladies. No one will ever take them as brides now, and he'd better accept this offering before he faces the wrath of the gods. Earlier on, This genius idea was concocted by the Count to investigate the true identity of Cain, but the king was shocked to find out that both of their daughters wanted to marry Cain. Hearing of his great accomplishments, he was determined to keep Cain in this kingdom. Cain thinks that this is the worst possible situation he's found himself in. Cain's father offers no advice, and the pressure of the entire situation begins to collapse onto him. With no other option but to give in, Cain accepts becoming their husband. Talisa and Sil think they will never forget the nights they spent together, and Cain explains it was just a misunderstanding because of all the different positions they had to do. They ask him what he's saying, and Cain tries to clarify that he meant the position of the beds. Poor guy can't catch a break. A few days later, Cain visits the royal church to meet with the gods. Zenom wonders what took him so long, but Cain explains that his stats had become too overwhelming. With his current stats, Cain's become the strongest human alive. Zenom asks him if he would like to become a demigod, but even with a status like that, there are still limits to what Cain can achieve alone. So, Zenom advises him to make strong relationships. He goes on to ask Cain if he would create some entertainment based on his knowledge from his previous life. Cain thinks he can create the perfect game, and Zenom and the god of technology beg him to create something like that. Later that day, Rainey was shopping for some clothes, and Cain had enough of her broom obsession. He ran out and noticed Parma outside, the girl he saved 5 years ago. Her uncle, Tanis, introduces himself to Cain and is shocked to find out that he's a noble. Cain asks him to just treat him like any other kid and invites him to browse his shop. It's an antique store where every item is crafted by Tanis. Cain asks if he could make a special order for him. Tanis is interested, so Cain shows him the blueprints of the game he's trying to create. With such an interesting concept, Tanis thinks this would be a great hit. Cain asks him to create a prototype and pays him a full gold coin for it. Tanis couldn't accept such a high payment, but Cain tells him he should treat it as an investment in their relationship. Tanis humbly accepts and promises that he will create the best game board for him. Cain is glad and leaves the store but finds out that Ren is ready to destroy him for disappearing on her. She asks him why he didn't see all the clothes she tried on for him, but Cain says she would look good in all of them anyway. Ren is glad to hear that her brother thinks she's ugly, because she's going to teach him the hard way what he's supposed to say to her. This is scary. She spends all night trying on different outfits to impress her Oni-chan and decides to punish him by making him try them on. However, Sylvia comes in to save the day and informs him that Tanis has finished the prototype inside his shop. Cain is amazed that it looks exactly like the reverse he imagined. They spend the afternoon playing the game together, and Tanis thinks this will become the next trend and is positive it will become a bestseller. Cain suggests they create a fancier version for the nobles since he's sure the wealthier people will want a premium product. He proposes making 50 of the noble version and 1,000 of the normal version. Tanis thinks Cain is a genius, but his company can't afford to create such a large inventory all at once. So Cain smashes some gold coins on the table like a top G. Tanis promises he will create all of the boards as quickly as possible. To ensure their product isn't stolen, they create an off-brand patent by presenting the board to the commerce god and vowing their commitment to the contract. The board begins to glow a golden hue in front of them, fulfilling their contract with the gods. It makes one more request and asks him if they could create an extravagant game for the royal family. Tanis is honored that his company would ever be considered for such a project, and Parma thinks he's amazing for having connections with the king. Cain thinks she doesn't even know half of the story because the gods are probably enjoying the game he just created for them. The next day is the debut ceremony, so Garm warns Cain to watch out for parents introducing their daughters to him. Cain says he won't because he's a top G, and will create the largest harem, and Garm is shocked that his son is so ruthless. Inside the castle, Cain sees Cornago with his children and thinks he looks nasty. The Duke and Silk meet each other, but his smile scares Cain. The Duke thanks him for saving his daughter and hopes they will have a favorable relationship. Cain realizes that he's screwed but decides he won't back down. In front of her own father, Cain tells Silk that she's the most beautiful girl in all of the lands and promises that he will never leave her. Unlike her father's ex-wife, who cheated on him because he was so useless and ugly. Emotional damage ensues. Her father retorts, "You're ugly, you are disgusting, I'm going to kill you. Give me $200. Garm won't allow someone to roast his son, so he tells the Duke that he's Silk's real father. It's an evil world we live in, they remark. They walk off, and Garm tells Cain that he definitely destroyed every bit of the Duke's confidence. Cain says he's glad he was born to such a Giga Chad. These fighters are straight up savages. The royal guards blow the trumpets, and the king makes his entrance. Cain doesn't care about anything the king is saying because he's too smitten with the princess's beauty. After his speech, Cain greets the king and says that the princess is more beautiful than a goddess and that her presence has him choking harder than. He decides not to say that part. Cain promises Teles that he will never leave her. Unlike the queen, who's constantly sleeping with the royal guards. Who hurt this dude? Everyone wonders. The king tells Garm that he's a worthless dad for raising such a mistake of a child. Cain, however, retorts, I'm about to end this man's whole career. Cain then apologizes for all his banter and gifts the king a reversey game he developed with his company as an apology. The king, intrigued, wants to hear all about it. After finding out what his daughter's been saying, the king commands Cain to come to his room later, or be executed. Cain reluctantly agrees. Garm asks Cain when he became such a business magnate, and Cain replies that he needed to do this in order to take care of his mansion since he's richer than his own broke dad. Garm accepts the insult, as all he's ever desired was for his children to become more successful than him, but he wants Cain to make sure he can make friends with children his age. Cain is glad to have such a caring dad who helps him roast everyone. Just then, Silk arrives and tries to steal Cain away. They sit together, and Silk tries to ensure Teles doesn't have a chance with him. However, Koro's children come to interrupt their party. One of the boys compliments Silk, saying she's wearing a beautiful dress, but Silk does her best to avoid responding. One of his lackeys tells Cain that he should leave because Hobito is having a private conversation. Cain tries to introduce himself, but Hobito tells Cain that he should apologize for bothering Miss Silk and upsetting her. Cain calmly responds that he'll make Hobito apologize first, pointing out that he's being rude. Hobito, infuriated, challenges Cain to meet him in the parking lot, but since there are no cars in this world, they agree to meet in the field instead. Silk is worried that Cain will be hurt, so she hugs him tightly, trying to protect him. Hobito, tired of being ignored, insists they begin the battle already. Silk doesn't care what he's saying and continues hugging Cain, who remains calm. Koro's lackeys, annoyed, start performing a rain dance, attempting to summon lightning toward them. Another lackey, convinced he can do a better rain dance, begins his own summoning spell. Silk, fed up with the nonsense, yells at them to stop their foolishness. She declares that Cain isn't just any ordinary child, he's a baron and the third son of Margrave Garm. She adds that he saved the princess from an army of 30 orcs. At this revelation, Koro and his lackeys bow to Cain, begging for his forgiveness, before running away like cockroaches. After they leave, Silk realizes Cain could have revealed his status earlier but chose not to, simply to make them look dumb. Silk threatens to tell the princess about it, but Cain begs her not to. She promises to keep it a secret if Cain agrees to go on a date with her. Just then, Teles arrives and asks what they're keeping a secret. Cain quickly stops Silk from speaking. Teles, jealous of Cain's closeness with Silk, threatens to tell on him. However, Silk reveals they're going on a date together. Furious and feeling left out, Teles demands that Cain make it up to her by taking her on a date as well. Ken thinks the girl looks pretty cute, so he decides, alright, let's actually go on a date this time. Just then, the king shows up from behind and asks, what kind of nonsense are you talking about, bro? What did you just say? Lee smiles and says, yeah, we're going on a date, just to chat a bit. Ken casually replies, yeah, bro, we're not actually going on a date, just having a little conversation, nothing more. The king, slightly flustered, says, alright, we'll deal with this calmly. But Ken realizes that the king has pretty much decided to take him out. Still, Ken keeps joking around because, well, he's the hero of the story. Of course, he's going to make it out alive. The next day, the king tries to kill Ken again, but when he sees him, he wonders, how is this guy still alive? Did he actually come back from the dead? Then Duke arrives and says, alright, guys, let's play a little reverse game. It'll freshen things up. A few days later, Ken feels like checking out his mansion. But when he gets there, he's shocked. This place looks like a complete wreck. Using his magic, he peeks into every room and begins cleaning with his magical powers. Soon, every room sparkles with freshness and light, as if nothing had ever happened. Sylvia arrives and happily joins the other servants because she's about to become Ken's personal maid. She quickly calls a few maids and puts them to work cleaning. Needless to say, after all the fun and chaos, Sylvia and the rest of the staff end up forming one solid team. After all, every story needs a little drama and a touch of fun, and in Ken's life, that's exactly what happens at every turn. But interestingly, not a single speck of dust was left anywhere. Ken explains that he used magic to clean everything. Sylvia then goes off to organize Ken's belongings, while Colin suggests she head home. Ken, being Ken, completely forgets that his older brothers are supposed to visit today. Back at the Grand Estate, Ken's brothers arrive and congratulate him on acquiring the mansion. They're proud of him and happy to call him their little brother. Ken shows his family around his new mansion, but Graham seems a bit puzzled because he remembers it being in complete ruins before. Ken explains that he used a little magic to restore everything. Sarah feels proud, thinking her son is far more talented than Graham's second wife's child. As Ken gives them a tour of the house, Graham suggests that Ken should decorate it with some kind of art piece. Ken confidently believes he has a solution. He disappears for a brief moment, and when he reappears, Sylvia screams in fear, and all the maids scatter in panic. Standing before them is a massive red dragon. Graham, still keeping his composure, asks Ken, "What's the meaning of this?" Ken casually replies, "This is a red dragon." Graham raises an eyebrow and says, "Oh, I thought it was my ex-wife." Curious, Graham asks why the red dragon is here. Ken proudly explains, "I defeated it single-handedly." This dragon was classified as a disaster-level threat, and no one had ever managed to defeat it before. Graham feels proud to have such a brave son. In this world, the corpse of a dead red dragon is worth 10,000 platinum coins, and Ken realizes that's equivalent to $100 million in his old world. Just then, they hear Sarah screaming from the bathroom, and everyone rushes over. Sarah exclaims, "Is this really a bathroom? Because this has satisfied me more than Graham ever could." Thinking she might have exaggerated a bit, Graham silently steps inside to investigate. Once inside, Graham is genuinely impressed and mutters to himself, "I need a bathroom like this in my mansion too." The guests would be thrilled. Ken is puzzled as to why guests would even come to his house. Graham explains, when a noble becomes the owner of a mansion, it's customary to throw a grand party and invite all the nobles. But Ken isn't thrilled about the idea of hosting a party. Colin steps in and informs him, "I've already prepared the guest list for you." Ken noticed that Count Go was also invited, but he really didn't want to see his face. The only name missing from the list was the king's because only a count or high-ranking nobles could extend an invitation to him. Now they realized they had to make all the preparations and prepare gifts for everyone, but Ken had no idea what to give. Sylvia suggested that Ken could prepare gifts in his own style, and Ken loved the idea. Using his magic, they created a glass cup. Since daily use typically involved clay pottery, the glass cup was considered extremely luxurious. As for food, Ken planned to serve hamburgers to everyone. Sylvia thought it was the most delicious food she'd ever had. For drinks, they enjoyed sips of Mountain Dew, which their friends absolutely loved. But then Sylvia said, "How can one glass be enough?" She grabbed another glass, then another, and then one more. Both of them exclaimed, "This is so fun." But before they could continue their antics, Colin interrupted and informed Ken, "The king has summoned you." The king, slightly annoyed, asks, "Hey, why haven't I received an invitation to your party yet?" He continues, "I'm the one who gave you the mansion." But the Duke waves his own invitation in the king's face and says, "Silk is the better girl anyway." The king looks like he's about to cry and says, "I'm really disappointed in how you're treating your future father-in-law." Ken explains the truth and says, "I didn't have time to send the invitation because I've been so busy. So, I decided to invite you personally." The king understands, puffs up like a child trying to act serious, and then informs Ken that Queen Tail Sv will also be attending the party. The night of the debut party arrives, and Ken welcomes everyone. Silk enters with the Duke, and Ken compliments her, saying, "You're the most beautiful girl here," followed by, "I'll never let you go." They admire the red dragon statue, and Silk can barely contain her excitement. When it's time for Ken to address everyone, Colin informs him that now is the moment to thank the guests. Ken steps forward, thanks everyone sincerely, and expresses his hope that they're all enjoying the party. His parents sample the drink, and they're thoroughly impressed, not just by the taste but also by the elegance of the glass. Then the king makes his grand entrance. He takes one sip from the glass, and it's as if heaven itself has touched his taste buds. At dinner, the king takes a bite of a hamburger and becomes particularly fond of the white cream sauce. The queen, equally impressed, tells the king that she's just experienced a unique sensation and requests Ken to install the same sprayer in their bathroom. The king, curious, tries it himself. Moments later, he lets out a loud shout that echoes throughout the party. When he emerges from the bathroom, he tries to act like nothing happened and casually tells Ken, "Install that sprayer in my bathroom immediately." Ken promises that he will satisfy the king's daughter, meaning he will spray the bathroom. The king, pleased, says that his guest meal and everything about his house are excellent, and this is the best hospitality. The crowd gathers around him to praise him, and he's happy that all his efforts have paid off. However, Colin informs him that trouble is approaching. Kaneko arrives at Ken's mansion and calls it a doghouse, because he knows nothing about the dragon statue. Upon seeing it, he screams in fear, and Ken apologizes, saying that his red dragon scared him. Kaneko criticizes Ken's decorations, but everyone else thinks Kaneko's attitude is awful. Like a typical man, he sits at the table, takes a sip of Mountain Dew from Sylvia, and says it's terrible, but then drinks it like a dog to quench his thirst. Ken offers him a hamburger, which Kaneko also criticizes as bad, but he eats the entire thing. All the nobles are watching Ken's mistreatment, and Colin tells him to stay calm. Suddenly, Ken has a brilliant idea. He brings a glass for Kaneko and says, "This is a small gift." Kaneko demands all the glasses in the hamburger recipe. He yells, saying he wants 100 glasses immediately. Ken apologizes and promises to give him the most amazing and valuable thing in the kingdom, something even more surprising than a gem. Hearing this, Kaneko immediately gets excited, thinking he's going to receive the kingdom's greatest and most valuable gift. Then, the king suddenly appears, completely surprising Kaneko. He's shocked and thinks, why has such a big man come to such a small man's house? The king angrily responds that he's here because Ken saved his daughter. The duke asks, did he come after the king? Then, the king threatens Kaneko, saying that if he continues mistreating Ken, he will lose his rank. Kaneko has to apologize and says that he was impressed by the food and drinks, but the king tells him to act like a real noble and orders him to leave. Silk approaches Ken and realizes that it was all part of his plan. The duke asks, did you use them? And Ken responds, yes, I used the king. Hearing this, the king gets a little angry. A week later, Ken runs into Captain Dime while walking. Dime has been sent by the Prime Minister to store some materials from the monsters, so he takes Ken to the storage room. However, Ken finds the room very small. Dime, astonished, asks, is yours that big? Then he asks, are these monster red dragons this huge? But Ken replies, nothing like that. These are legendary earth dragons. Dime is surprised but then tells Ken to leave the monsters in the field. So, Ken takes these rare monsters out of his item box. Seeing the massive number of monsters, Dime asks Ken, are you a hero, or a disciple of some god? Ken hesitates for a moment, and says, nothing like that, before trying to say goodbye and run off. But Dime stops him and asks, would you like to take a test with the other knights and meet their leader? Dime introduces Ken to the other soldiers and informs him that they will be engaging in a duel. However, one of the soldiers is confused and asks in astonishment, should we really be fighting against a 10-year-old? He seems very concerned, so Dime orders him to fight Ken first. The soldier allows Ken to make the first move, and Ken happily agrees. In an instant, he uses his boost ability and disappears right before the soldier's eyes. The next moment, Ken defeats him with a single strike. Ken thanks him and tries to leave, but Dime says, you should try fighting them all at once. Just as Ken is about to fight, their leader yells at them. She asks, why are you fighting with a little kid? And tries to comfort him by giving him a hug. They ask Dime what's going on, and Dime tries to explain. Ken is the one who saved the princess from 50 orcs all by himself. The leader understands and tells Ken, now, you'll fight me. Ken asks her, why are you holding a real sword? But she replies, so it can be more fun, and starts running toward him. Ken tries to stop her, but she skillfully avoids him. She enhances her physical abilities, and both rush towards each other. The soldiers are impressed by the scene because they can see that there is someone who can match the leader's speed. Ken attempts to block her strikes and counterattack, but her defense is excellent. He uses magic and charges at her, but suddenly, she disappears from his sight and teleports next to him. He places his sword at her throat and says, the duel is over. However, Tijuana experiences the most amazing feeling of her life and hugs Ken, saying she will marry him. Ken, slightly surprised, responds that they just met and he doesn't even know her well. Tijuana introduces herself as Duke's daughter, Tijuana, and explains that even though she's older, she's an elf, and elves live for up to 300 years, meaning she'll stay young for a long time. Ken tries to escape from the clingy girl and says that she should get her father's permission first. However, Tijuana insists that there's no problem, because when she left home, she told her father that she wouldn't return until she found a life partner. Ken still argues that she needs to ask her father and many others for permission. Tijuana remains firm in her decision and tells Dime that she's going to meet the king to set everything up. Both of them reach the king. Tijuana stands up, and her voice changes as she announces that she is going to get married. The king asks, what does this mean? Ken explains that he broke through her defense with a wooden stick, and now she wants to marry him. The king, surprised, reveals that Tijuana is not just the leader of the army, she is the princess of a state full of elves. The king surprises Tijuana with shocking news that Ken is already engaged to his daughter and the duke's daughter. Tijuana is taken aback and thinks to herself how amazing Ken is, having won the hearts of both girls. She decides that now, no matter what, she will marry him. Everyone is surprised and wonders why Tijuana thought this way. However, the king tells Tijuana that she must first get her father's permission. Tijuana accepts this and tells Ken that she will take him with her. Ken, surprised, asks where they are going, and Tijuana reveals that they will face each other with swords to strengthen their relationship. The king is shocked, wondering how the most powerful knight in the entire kingdom could possibly lose, and he asks Graham if he knows the secret behind the strength of both Ken and Tijuana. However, Graham doesn't know anything. Duke had informed the king that Ken seemed nervous when he talked about the gods, which raises more suspicion in the king's mind. The count also thinks he can test Ken using ancient books of legends. One day, after an intense training session, Ken is exhausted. He tries to escape, but Duke catches him and brings him to the king's room. The king asks Ken, "Why do you look so troubled?" Ken replies, "It's just, Your Majesty, I'm tired of looking at your face." The king tells Ken that he brought him here to show him something. The count opens a book, which is an emperor-level magic book that once belonged to King Yuya. Ken, surprised, asks, "Can I read this book?" The king gives him permission. Ken opens the book and feels like he's seen these temples before. Eventually, the king understands and tells him that this book is written in a language that no ordinary person can read. Ken looks at the book again, thinking about what he's read. The king explains that this book was originally written by the king in Japanese. Ken fully understands now because he realizes that he has been reincarnated into this world. Now, it becomes difficult for him to hide his true identity in front of the king, but he thinks maybe he can trust these people. He asks the king, "Can you keep everything I'm about to tell you a secret? If not, I'll have to leave this kingdom." The king agrees. After this, Ken revealed that he had memories from his past life. He used to live in the same country where the first king came from, and that country was called Japan. He apologizes to the king for not revealing his true identity until now. Graham, who was present, asks in shock, "Is he really your son?" Ken replies, "The gods confirmed that he is my child when I was 5 years old." The entire room is stunned to hear that he met the gods. Ken smiles and says, "They're all crazy, and I keep meeting them." Graham tells Ken to show his true status, and then everyone is shocked to see his level, which is extremely high. The king is at a loss about what to do next, because the gods' chosen appointment is considered the highest honor in humanity. Even the king should bow before him. But Ken stops him and says, "I don't want any of this." He clearly says that even though he has all the memories of his past life, what he wants in this life is all that matters to him. Everything he ever wanted has already been given to him. A loving family, magical powers, and people who take care of him. There is nothing better than this for him now. In his past life, his family wasn't with him, but now he has everything he ever dreamed of. Then, Ken thanks his father for raising him. He apologizes to the king for hiding the truth and asks the king to continue treating him as he always has. The king humbly accepts this and promises that everyone will be treated the same way as they have been so far. But the king also feels that maybe Ken should have been the one to become the king. Just then, Tijuana enters the room and shows her father's approval to marry Ken. Everyone is surprised to see this. She takes Ken with her. The duke tells the king, "Don't worry, Ken will always be the same as he has always been." The king simply thinks. The king tells Ken that he fully trusts him and orders everyone in the room to keep this matter secret. His only wish is that Ken protect the kingdom, his family, and also the girls who care about him or might need his help in the future. A few years later, Ken reads the books left by Yuya. It is written that if Ken can read this, he must be from Japan, just like Yuya. The book contains all the information about Yuya's life, and it also mentions that his death was caused by Truck-kun, but unlike Ken, he wasn't reincarnated. He was summoned directly into this world. As Ken is reading the book, Silk and Talus enter. They think he's preparing for the Academy's entrance exam and want to study with him, but Ken tells them he doesn't have time to study with them. The next day, they ask him again to study together, but he tells them they can study together another time and runs off. As soon as he steps outside, his third future wife runs towards him, wanting to train with him. Ken tells her the same thing, that they'll train together another time, and runs off again. Today is special for Ken because it's his 12th birthday. On this day, he can finally join the guild as an adventurer. Inside the guild, he bumps into a red-haired man who looks at him and says, "Hey, are you a little kid?" Ken responds, "We only get one life." Ken laughs to himself thinking that he only has one life, and following his own advice, he decides to charm as many girls as he can. He approaches the receptionist, who asks if he wants to register. Ken decides to hide his barren title, fills out the form, and hands it to the girl. She then asks him to bite his finger for a blood magic test, and gives him a G rank adventurer card. As Ken steps outside, he recalls that his teacher was at D rank and wonders what they might be doing right now. The girl introduces herself. I'm Rita, nice to meet you. Just then, 3 thugs arrive and tell her, leave the kids and come with us. It quickly becomes clear that this isn't an adventurers guild, but rather a red light district. The thugs start harassing the girl. The leader of the thugs tries to kick the girl, but he ends up falling down himself. His companions step forward to fight, but they accidentally collide with each other. The leader tries to pull out his sword, but Ken tells him to stop. At that moment, the red-haired boy from earlier arrives and says to the thugs, if you want to fight, I can fight with you all night. The thugs, frightened, run off. Ken thinks to himself, if Claude hadn't stopped them, what would have happened to them today? Then, the two of them sit down drinking Mountain Dew, and Claude enjoys the fight, considering it a good challenge. Ken tells Claude that he was trained by 2 tutors since childhood, and Claude thinks he has heard something about that. Claude celebrates Ken becoming an adventurer by drinking Mountain Dew with him. Ken asks him, why did the thug call you Ice Cream? Claude laughs and explains that his name is Ice Cream. He wields a fire sword, and his wife uses ice magic. They both trust each other, which is why their ranks have risen quickly. When Ken sees a gold card, he is shocked because that means Claude is at A rank. However, Claude feels that it's nothing compared to the previous king, who had a triple S rank. Just then, a staff hits Ken on the head, and his wife, Rena, asks, why are you drinking Mountain Dew? Claude introduces Rena, saying, this is Ken, he saved me. Rena looks at Ken and says, he's adorable. Then she adds, if anyone bothers him, I'll beat them up, just like I do with Claude. Claude laughs and says, if I hadn't stopped Ken, he would have caused rivers of blood. Hearing this, Rena slaps Claude hard on the head and tells him to stop drinking Mountain Dew, or else I'll make rivers of blood from you. Then she grabs Claude by the ear and drags him away. Sources later reveal that after that day, the poor man was never seen again. Ken thinks to himself that now, according to his G rank, he should take on a quest. Ken had to move items around in his item box but was afraid of getting caught. Just then, he noticed a quest that involved killing goblins, with no limit on the rewards. Excited, he happily accepted the quest and got ready to leave. However, his clingy future wife, Tifa, came running up and asked, what are you doing? Ken explained that he was going on his first mission today. Tifa dropped everything and didn't give Ken a chance to escape. Ken tried to run, but Tifa caught him. According to sources, after that day, Ken was never seen again. Tifa, excited to fight goblins with her husband, dragged him into the forest. To locate the goblins, Ken used his magic, which led him to their location. Tifa says, I'll run ahead, you follow me. It seems Tifa is extra cautious today. When they reach the goblins, Tifa spots a man who is about to die, and without hesitation, Ken teleports to him. Using his healing magic, Ken saves him just in time. Tifa charges toward the goblins, slicing through 3 of them in her path. The remaining goblins advance toward her, and Ken uses his magic to enhance Tifa's physical abilities. Tifa thanks him and promises to always stay by his side as she rushes forward to destroy the rest of the goblins. Ken is left wondering how he always ends up in these kinds of situations. Just then, green lizards appear, and Ken looks at them and says, I'll take care of all of them. Tifa runs off with the injured man, and Ken uses icy rocks to defeat all the lizards. Tifa thinks to herself, my husband is the best in the world. After a while, Nina arrives and is shocked to see not green lizards, but a giant hole. Back at the guild, Ken tells Rita that he defeated the green lizards and asks if he can receive a reward, even though he didn't officially apply for the quest. Rita is puzzled because only C-rank adventurers are capable of defeating a group of green lizards. Ken, however, mentions that he defeated nearly 30 of them. Rita is astonished and goes to report to the chief. The chief immediately orders to bring this boy to him. Ken introduces himself as Cedric and asks the chief how he managed to defeat the green lizards. After all, he's just a kid with a G rank, so it shouldn't be possible for him to defeat any of the lizards. Rita tells Cedric that accusing him of cheating is wrong, and Ken agrees with Rita. Ken says that he defeated the green lizards using normal methods. Cedric teases him, saying that he registered as a normal person, so he might be trying to scam the reward money. He also mentions that Ken's guild card will be confiscated. Ken wonders what kind of mess he's gotten himself into, but then the guild master enters. The chief informs the guild master that the boy is a fraud, The guild master looks at Ken and thinks he's an interesting person. He sits down and asks the chief why he believes Ken is a fraud. He then tells Cedric that he still has a lot to learn. Afterward, the guild master calls for someone to enter, and Tifa rushes in, shouting that she's happy to see her husband. Ken tells Tifa that they need to keep their identities secret, and after pushing her aside, asks what she's doing there. Tifa explains that she came to the guild to warn everyone about the oxen and lizards. The guild master reveals that he knew Ken was a baron. The chief is shocked, and the guild master tells him that Ken is the same person who saved the princess and Silk from the oxen, and he is the son of Margrave Graham. The guild master then adds that if Ken marries Tifa, they will become brothers-in-law. Ken is surprised to hear that he is Tifa's brother. The guild master then asks Cedric if he still considers Ken a fraud. Cedric immediately lowers his head in apology. Tifa explains that typically, if a commoner insults a noble, the punishment is severe. The person would be stripped naked in the middle of the square and stoned. If they somehow survive, they would then be whipped with nails attached to the whip. If they still manage to survive, they would be stoned again while naked, and if they survive that, they would be whipped again with nails. Hearing this, everyone thinks it's a bit too much. Tifa then adds that such a person would typically be hanged, but Ken says that he would never do such a thing. He accepts the apology and advises that before accusing anyone in the future, they should conduct a thorough investigation. The guild master tells Ken that he will accept his victory over the lizards, but he will no longer remain at the G rank. As an apology, he orders that Ken's rank be raised to C rank. Tifa argues that this is too low, considering Ken defeated a dragon and even beat it with a wooden stick. Cedric, hearing this, is shocked. After gathering all the information, Tifa's brother raises Ken's rank to A rank. He asks Rita and Cedric to handle the paperwork and apologizes to Ken. The guild master thanks Ken for understanding everything and taking care of his sister. He also acknowledges that he knows Tifa forced Ken into this marriage. Tifa admits that she had already confessed her love, and Ken tells her to explain everything or people might misunderstand. However, her brother knows how foolish his sister can be. Ken is happy to know he's not the only one who is wise, and the gods still think Ken is the same as before. The god of magic asked Genom why he decided to double all the blessings. Genom replied that he needed to become even more powerful because Aaron's seal was about to break, and when that happens, the world will be in trouble. Aaron has been sealed for 300 years, and during this time, Ken needs more training before Aaron comes to destroy the peace of the world. There is only one way to train Ken, and all the gods agree that Ken should be trained under a mysterious individual. On the day of the exam, Sylvia is worried because Ken has slept too much, and she didn't wake him up early. She quickly tells him to drink milk for breakfast, but Ken runs off, and she feels a little sad because he's grown up now and only likes cow's milk. Ken teleports directly to the exam site and thinks to himself as he walks into the class that Tellus and Silk aren't taking the exam with him. The teacher begins the exam, which is supposed to last for 2 hours, but Ken, due to his knowledge from his past world, finishes it in just 30 minutes. He then spends the remaining time sleeping. After the written exam ends, the teacher takes them to the field for a magic test and tells them to use their strongest magic on a target. The teacher reassures everyone not to worry because there is a barrier around the area. Other students start throwing fireballs, and Ken realizes he can't use his full strength. So, when it's his turn, he throws a simple fireball, which turns blue. The teacher has never seen magic like this before and tries to stop it, but she sees that Ken's fireball destroys the entire field for several kilometers. She had assumed that beginner-level magic would be safe at full power because of the barrier, but she is shocked to see how strong someone so young can be. She goes to check if anyone has been burned by his magic and then tells everyone that they will begin the swordsmanship test. In the other field, the professor introduces the adventurers who will be conducting the exams. Ken notices that Claude is also there, and he decides to duel with him. Ken uses his boost ability and rushes toward Claude. The two clash, and Ken blocks every one of Claude's attacks. As they continue to fight, Ken tells Claude to rest, saying that if it were any other student, their band would have already rung. But Claude is enjoying himself and activates his own boost ability. Despite Claude's increased speed, Ken manages to counter all of his attacks, though he's concerned that these attacks could break the bones of the other students. The teacher yells at them to stop fighting, as all the other students' morale has already been shattered. Claude is in a very bad state. Later, he promises Ken that they will duel again. Then the teacher arrives and announces that the exam is over, and now they can come to see the results. At home, Sylvia asks Ken if he's ready to drink cow's milk. but Ken avoids her and says he completed the exam and everything went well. Hearing this, Sylvia becomes happy and wants to celebrate by feeding him milk, but Ken says he's not hungry. This makes Sylvia angry, as she thinks he's lying, and she runs off crying. Inside the palace, the king asks Ken what mischief he has done this time, and Ken replies that he's tired of his meaningless questions. Radha tells him to be quiet and then asks where he took the exam. Neither Tellus nor Silk had seen him, and Ken doesn't remember seeing them either. He says he entered through the south gate. The king asks Ken if he knew there were two entrances to the academy. Ken says he knew the north gate was for the wealthy, while the south gate was for the unemployed and thieves. The king then asks which gate Ken used to enter. Ken realizes that he entered through the wrong gate, which caused several problems. When the teacher contacted the Duke and informed him about the incident, the Duke immediately understood that this was the same Ken. The Count shows him the bill for all the expenses, and Ken asks for forgiveness this time. The king then sends Ken away, telling him never to show his face again. The day of the results arrives, and Ken looks for his ranking but can't find himself anywhere. Silk rushes over to congratulate him for topping the class. At the gate, Ken sees his sister, and she runs over to hug him, congratulating him for topping the class and giving a speech. Meanwhile, Sylvia is thinking about how to feed Ken milk. When Ken arrives, she asks if he wants some milk, but Ken tells her to leave, to get out of his sight. His words hurt Sylvia, but she hides her feelings, hugs him, and congratulates him for topping the class. She knew his result would be great, so she goes to prepare the best milk for him to celebrate that night. Ken is thinking about the milk situation when the butler says that tonight, he will drink his milk.